Why do so many choose silence in the face of wrongdoing? Throughout human history, those who dare to stand up and point out what's wrong have always been the minority. The majority often choose the easier path, silence. Why? Is it because everyone agrees with the wrongdoing? Usually not. But there are deep psychological and social reasons that lead people to step back. 1. Herd mentality and the fear of exclusion. Humans are social creatures. In prehistoric times, being cast out from the group meant danger to survival. Today, being labeled a troublemaker can cost someone their job, relationships, or even lead to attacks. Speaking up means going against the crowd, and few are strong enough to do that alone. 2. The bystander effect. When many witness a wrong, each assumes someone else will speak up. The result, no one does. 3. Personal gain. Some see the wrong clearly but hesitate. If I speak, will I lose my job? Will I face retaliation? They choose to turn a blind eye for their family, for their livelihood. 4. Self-rationalization. We don't want to think of ourselves as cowards, so we find excuses. Maybe they have their reasons. I don't know the full story. Everyone else is doing it. Over time, we lull ourselves into complacency. 5. Powerlessness against the system. When facing a massive and wrong, people feel too small to make a difference. When hope fades, action stops. But is silence neutral? According to Holocaust survivor and human rights activist Elie Wiesel, neutrality between right and wrong is siding with the wrong. Choosing silence before injustice often enables it to spread further. Clair Patterson, the man who refused silence. In the mid-20th century, Clair Patterson, a scientist studying the Earth age, uncovered something horrifying. The planet was being poisoned by lead, a substance that causes irreversible brain damage, especially in children. The main culprit, leaded gasoline, widely used in cars at the time. When Patterson published his findings, he faced severe backlash. His funding was cut. He was barred from lab. He was mocked and seen as a thorn in the side of massive oil corporations, but he didn't stop. He kept researching, kept speaking out, undeterred. His persistence helped lead to the ban on leaded gasoline in many countries. The result, lead levels in children's blood dropped by up to 80%, saving millions from irreversible brain damage. We often think that being good means not doing wrong, but there's something more dangerous than overt, evil, silent good. Have you ever seen injustice and turned away? Have you ever chosen safety over speaking for what's right? Silence often stems from a very human instinct, fear of standing out, fear of backlash, fear of exclusion. Gustave Le Bon called it the dissolution of the individual in the collective, where one stops thinking and acts like the rest. Not everyone can speak out forever, but if no one speaks, the wrong becomes normal. If you're hesitating, think of Clair Patterson and remember, one timely word can save more than you think. The silent laboratory. The lab was unusually quiet that day. No chatter, no noisy machines. Only the scratch of a pen and the sound of his own heartbeat. Clair Patterson, a young chemist with disheveled hair and eyes sharp as a scalpel, stared at the data before him. The numbers didn't add up. He was researching the Earth's age, one of humanity's greatest questions. With each ancient rock sample from around the world, he meticulously measured uranium and lead to determine radioactive decay. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Every sample had abnormally high lead levels, far too high to be natural. He double-checked, repeated experiments, switched equipment, even moved to a different lab. The results stayed the same. Lead was infiltrating everything, not just rocks, but air, water, dust, and soil. It wasn't random. It wasn't a global coincidence. Patterson didn't know then that he was embarking on a decades-long journey. A journey no one asked for. A journey no one paid for, but one that would change the world. He dug deeper. Why was lead so prevalent? Where was it coming from? Who was putting it into our environment? A name emerged: General Motors. In the 1920s, they developed leaded gasoline, marketed as a technological breakthrough for smoother, more durable, efficient engines. It was a success. The world adopted it without question. But Patterson was different. He saw, he measured, and he couldn't ignore it. He knew lead was toxic, especially to children, where even small amounts could cause irreversible brain damage. He faced a choice: continue his safe, funded, prestigious research on the Earth's age, or pursue a risky truth that could destroy his career. He chose truth, and he immediately felt the cost. Funding dwindled. Research institutes refused collaboration. Colleagues distanced themselves. People don't like troublemakers, especially those who challenge giants. But Patterson didn't give up. He didn't shout, make banners, or incite. He did what he did. Best measured, recorded, and presented data. He expanded his research from rocks to air, from ocean sediments to Antarctic ice, everywhere. The results were the same. Lead was ubiquitous, and it came from gasoline. Patterson understood silence would normalize the wrong. He didn't need everyone to believe him. He just needed to keep going, not for fame, not for money, but for life. For the children poisoned before they could grow. For the mothers unaware why their children struggled. For the people living in cities blanketed by lead dust. Patterson wasn't a caped hero. He was a scientist, hunched over test tubes and spreadsheets. But sometimes, one such person is enough. One who refuses silence. Chapter 1. The Lonely Fight. Patterson left the lab with hundreds of pages of data and a truth no one wanted to hear. He wasn't an activist, not a charismatic speaker, not a crowd pleaser, but he had evidence. He knew challenging leaded gasoline meant confronting a colossal system built on power, money, and decades of silence. General Motors, Standard Oil, Ethyl Corporation, they didn't just produce gasoline. They controlled media, research, and politics. When Patterson published his first study on non-widespread lead poisoning, the backlash was swift. Funding vanished without explanation. Conferences barred him from speaking. Colleagues kept their distance. A newspaper called him an extremist scientist. An editorial questioned, "Is Patterson doing science or politics?" He was sidelined not because he was wrong, but because he was right. Dangerously so. Yet he didn't fight with anger or attacks. He kept collecting data, knowing that if he gave up, the truth about lead would be buried again. He worked with unprecedented intensity. He measured snow samples from Colorado's high mountains, sediments from the Pacific Ocean's depths, and pristine Antarctic ice untouched by humans. Every sample, every number, every piece pointed to one. Truth lead wasn't natural, it came from human gasoline use. Patterson published more studies, thicker, more detailed, irrefutable. He showed lead levels in city dwellers' blood were 10 to 100 times higher than in remote areas. He proved urban children showed clear signs of neurological damage. He emphasized no level of lead exposure is safe. His words were no longer whispers in the lab. They echoed beyond the door. Some began to listen, independent researchers, curious journalists, a few congressmen asking questions. Patterson knew he couldn't stay alone forever. He didn't need everyone to follow him immediately. He just needed them to ask one question. Why is there so much lead? But as more listened, the corporation's resistance grew fiercer. They hired scientists to discredit him, published articles calling his work alarmist, unsubstantiated, fear-mongering. They spent millions reinforcing one message: leaded gasoline is safe. Patterson faced two forces: billion-dollar interest versus millions of lives. He looked at his calloused hands from lab work and knew he couldn't stay silent. Even when pushed out of academic circles, labeled a rebel, or left without a pat on the back saying, "Good job." Because sometimes you must choose between being liked and doing what's right. Patterson chose. Chapter 2. The Quiet Declaration. Washington, D.C., autumn 1965. The air was tense. Clair Patterson stood at a congressional hearing podium. No fancy suit, no legal team, just a thin man with a thick stack of documents. Before him sat rows of senators. Behind him, stone-faced oil company representatives. In the hushed room, his steady voice rang through the microphone. "I am not here to play politics. I am here to say we're poisoning our own children." He presented numbers, charts, blood test results from children in major cities, rates of neurological damage and intellectual delays, all tied to traffic density and leaded gasoline. Some senators frowned, some scribbled notes, while corporate representatives whispered among themselves. Patterson paused, then said deliberately, "If you wait until there's no doubt left, it may be too late." It wasn't a typical warning. It was the first bell to awaken a nation. The hearing ended. No cheers, no applause, no embraces. Patterson quietly packed his papers and left, knowing he'd done what was needed. But the Ethio Corporation struck back, holding press conferences, hiring experts to deny risks, and flooding TV with ads claiming there's no clear evidence leaded gasoline harms health. They argued, we've used it for decades. If it were harmful, wouldn't we see the consequences? Patterson knew some consequences are quiet, insidious, destroying cells and children silently. He returned to the lab undeterred, testing blood from rural children with near zero lead levels and comparing them to urban children in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, where levels were 10, 20, even 30 times higher. The data spoke louder than he ever could, but data alone wasn't enough without listeners. So, Patterson did something he never imagined. He spoke to the public. He wrote for newspapers, attended community seminars, gave TV interviews not for fame, but so mothers could understand why their children struggled, so workers could know why their kids had headaches, so society could see we were growing accustomed to living in poison. Other voices joined. Independent scientists verified his work, reaching the same conclusion: he was right. Health organizations issued lead warnings. Media, initially hesitant, began reporting. Light slowly pierced the truth's dark corners. Patterson walked alone, but was no longer solitary. He knew that even a mighty system crumbles when one person speaks, then another listens, then another, until silence cracks. Chapter 3, The Turning Tide. In 1971, a small article appeared in Nature. No cover, no sensational headline, but it silenced many in the scientific community. Author Clair Patterson. Content analysis of lead in 1,000-year-old Antarctic ice, showing a spike starting in the early 20th century, perfectly matching the rise of leaded gasoline. Patterson didn't just prove the present was poisoned. He proved when humanity began poisoning itself. It was no longer a hypothesis, it was evidence, frozen in history. People began listening seriously. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency EPA invited Patterson to its scientific advisory panel, not to ask if he was right, but what to do next. The battle shifted from reason to action, and Patterson knew this phase was tougher. Oil companies didn't sit idle. They hired lawyers, lobbied, and launched campaigns claiming, banning lead will damage cars, hurt the economy, cost jobs. Fear was their tool, fear of change, instability, truth. Patterson didn't respond with threats or theatrics. He kept doing what he'd done for 20 years, measuring, recording, analyzing, speaking. He reported lead accumulation in farmland soil, which doesn't dissolve and lingers for centuries, entering crops, food, and bodies. He compared cities with trial lead bans to those without, showing clear drops in children's blood lead levels where bans existed. People began questioning corporate defenses. If it's not dangerous, why hide it? A quiet awakening spread. Teachers discussed environmental toxins in classrooms. Journalists pursued lead investigations. Parent groups demanded air quality transparency around schools. Patterson rarely appeared on TV or accepted accolades. He didn't need them. He didn't act for fame or money. He couldn't ignore the truth. In 1976, after decades of persistence, the EPA issued a mandate phase out lead from gasoline. Corporations fought back, threatening lawsuits, divestment, and production cuts. But they were too late. Public trust had shifted. In a rare speech after the mandate, Patterson said simply, "We allowed poison into every breath because it was convenient. Now it's time to choose life over ease." It wasn't one man's victory. It was the triumph of truth, data, and unwavering resolve. Chapter 4, A Quiet Legacy. After the 1976 mandate, America underwent a silent but profound change. No fireworks, no national holiday, just roads less toxic. Patterson didn't celebrate, didn't boast, didn't write a memoir about his great journey. He kept monitoring lead levels, guarding data from manipulation, answering questions society hadn't yet asked. Within 5 years, children's blood lead levels dropped nearly 40%. By 1990, nearly 80%, millions were spared irreversible brain damage. No one could count exactly how many minds were saved, but Patterson knew it was enough. He didn't need medals or monuments, just falling numbers and children's laughter unhindered by invisible poison. Not everyone was pleased. Some called him overly sensitive. Car makers complained about higher costs. Corporations mourned lost profits and delayed compliance. Patterson understood. Fighting wrong, it isn't a one-time act, but a long journey requiring steadfastness. By the late 1980s, other nations followed Europe, Japan, Australia, even developing countries, citing one name, Clair Patterson. He was no longer a troublemaker or extremist scientist, but the man who reshaped modern public health. He lived simply a small apartment, frugal habits, working from dawn to dusk in the lab. Those close to him said he carried a note: do what's right, even alone. Not a lofty philosophy, just a guiding star for a man who chose quiet persistence over silence. In late autumn 1995, Clair Patterson took his final breath at 73. No fanfare, no grand farewell, but he left in the quiet gratitude of a generation. The world didn't need to know his name to live healthier because of him. That was his greatest victory. Chapter 5, The Unseen Hero. After Patterson's death in 1995, the world didn't immediately realize what it lost. No national broadcast, no posthumous award, just a small science column noting chemist Clair Patterson, who fought ladled gasoline, dies at 73. But his numbers continued to shift. People understood. Blood lead levels kept falling. Rates of neurological disorders and developmental delays in children dropped sharply in countries that banned lead. Some studies even linked lower crime rates among teens to reduce childhood lead exposure. Patterson didn't just save young minds, he preserved behavior, futures, and humanity in society. Ironically, his name rarely appears in textbooks or science shows. He wasn't flashy, didn't create groundbreaking theories or famous inventions. He just did what was right, relentlessly, until it couldn't be denied. Young environmentalists began studying him, calling him the original whistleblower, the one who exposed truth while the world slept. A documentary filmmaker said, Patterson didn't change the world with speeches. He changed it with data, spreadsheets, and unshakable resolve. By the early 2000s, over 100 countries banned leaded gasoline. In 2011, the United Nations hailed it as one of the 20th century's greatest public health achievements, starting with a lone scientist in a California lab. Today, when you breathe cleaner air, When your child learns without the burden of lead in their blood, when doctors no longer explain brain damage in normal environments, you live in Patterson's legacy. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear lab coats, hunched over test tubes, recording numbers, asking, what else is hidden? His greatest legacy isn't the gasoline ban or voluminous reports, but a reminder: don't turn away from wrong. Don't stay silent before poison. Don't let fear choose safety over right. That's how the world changes one person, one voice, one truth, even if held by just one. You may not know Clair Patterson. You may work, drive, live in a smoggy city, unaware that, thanks to him, the air is cleaner. No monument bears his name. No holiday honors him. But that doesn't matter. True legacy isn't in being remembered, but in actions that keep changing lives long after you're gone. Patterson never sought applause. He couldn't accept a dangerous poison in children's blood just because it was convenient. He knew some things shouldn't be swallowed by silence. For over 20 years, he chose the path most avoid: speaking out against the crowd, corporations, even his own fears. He was mocked, sidelined, isolated by colleagues, but he held no grudges, only quiet persistence. Knowing truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs one person brave enough to hold it. That made him one of the 20th century's greatest silent heroes. Call to courage. When we speak of courage, we often think of battlefields or grand stages. But there's a quieter courage, refusing to look away from wrong, continuing when no one stands with you, staying silent under attack, letting truth answer. Clair Patterson taught us you don't need power or fame, just eyes that won't close to truth. If you're hesitating, wondering if your voice matters, remember him, the man who changed the planet by refusing silence. One timely word can save more than you think. Closing thoughts. Clair Patterson's story is not just a lesson in science, but a testament to resolve, conscience, and courage. In a world where wrong is sometimes painted as obvious, silence is complicity. Patterson showed that one person can shake a system by clinging to truth. Sometimes the right action isn't loud but steadfast, even if you walk alone. Thank you for joining us in this inspiring story. If it moved you, please subscribe to catch more meaningful tales. We'd love your feedback. Share your thoughts, reflections, or stories that touched you in the comments below. Every view, every message fuels our mission to bring kind and profound messages. Thank you.